Hi everyone, I'm Daria Smith, Portfolio Director at Bunch, and welcome to FHS Podcast. Today I'm thrilled to be joined by Johannes Torpe. Johannes is CEO founder of the design studio, and we are going to dive into a fascinating world of hospitality design today. Welcome, Johannes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Daria. A pleasure to be here.
Well, let's dive in straight into it. You've worked with high-end brands and restaurants and hospitality spaces around the world. What roles does design play in storytelling, and how do you craft an experience that stays with the guests long after they leave?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting question, right? Because I think in the world of hospitality, you have so many options. You have so many options to choose between different, food cultures and hospitality cultures, hotel experiences, and so on. But I think the reality of things is that people will be more connected to something that gives them authenticity. And many of these hospitality brands is kind of offering the same strategies, the same pillow menu, the same club sandwich, the same trouser press, and so on. And I think in a future perspective of hospitality, you need to offer something that is a surplus to that. And so when we work with both restaurants, food and beverage options, but also hotels, we always work about the narrative of the invisible hand, because in my experience as a over 50-year-old man, is that my first hospitality experience was actually my grandmother's. And probably most people, if you think about it, your grandmom was the first who gave you the invisible hand. With your parents, you have demands, you had people, shouting at you, do this, do that, sit down. You come to your grandparents, and all of a sudden, everything is like completely happening around you. You don't even have to think about it. And I think that's a great narrative to put into hospitality design. So everything you do has to be something that is kind of like happening around you invisibly. So when we design both restaurants and hotels, we look very deeply at, for a hotel, back of house. That back of house has to be working absolutely amazingly, because without that, you cannot create an experience that is invisible around you. Because that's really the key about it. You need to go into a scenario where you can forget about your everyday life and kind of get out of the routines that you have built up around. If you have kids, you have like a lot of rules you put around it. If you're a business traveler, you know what you want and you don't know what you don't want, but you would like to be surprised in a positive way. And that can only happen if the back of house is just seamlessly integrating behind you. So that's number one. And with restaurants, it's kind of the same experience, but that's both back of house, but it's also front of house. That even then there is a very present front of house, the experience has to be like it's invisible. But that also goes to not only the staff, it also goes to the lighting design, the acoustics, the seating arrangements. To me, a restaurant has to be consistent of only, corner tables, which is difficult because, you only have certain corners in a restaurant, but it has to feel like every space you're sitting in is important. And that's difficult. If you have a big space with a lot of tables in the middle of the room, you'd never feel like you're connected to a corner. So you have to arrange the restaurant and the space around that everyone have the same feeling of being important and sitting in a corner and feeling safe and secure in some way, right? So there's a lot of things to consider doing that design. And that excites me tremendously with everything we do, is that everything has to feel, like it's invisible hand following you around. And that's how we start the foundation of our work. And then we narrate that, of course, around the culture. Because I think, for instance, food is not based about, it's not a question of what food you're doing. It's a question of how you culturally integrate the food into the design. So, first of all is the back of house, the invisible hand. Then is the food, the original of where it comes from. And then it is, in the end, the design. But because if you don't take all those things in consideration before, you end up with a mediocre design that become, the international bar and grill at the
Mhm.
hospitality circus, right? And we just don't want that. You want something that really is telling the authenticity of the food. And that I think is really exciting. So that's where we work from. And then from there, we build the storytelling, the narrative about it. And so it's kind of like the way you approach it that makes it interesting. And I like to think about my grandmother every time.
Fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
being at grandmother's, it normally evokes quite an emotion as well. And
Yeah.
talking about that sensory experience that sort of deepens that engagement as well. What are
Yeah,
the
exactly.
key ingredients as well around creating that sensory effects and really deepens that engagement with the audience?
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, I think also, I mean, I can imagine when you went to your grandmother, I mean, maybe not all grandmothers are nice. Some of them are also evil, right? So, and demand more than your parents. But with your grandparents, what was that a hospitality experience, if you think about it?
Absolutely, it has
Yeah,
been it has been about the experience, and it's been the smell of the food,
exactly.
the emotion, the happiness, the smiles. It's all surrounded, and all the smells that associated with the place as well, outdoors,
Exactly.
the sounds in the street as well. So it's all
But
part
but
of.
but you actually answered your own question because that's a sensory experience around it. So so your grandmother was in a special location. That location had a sense of place that makes you connect with it, right? And I think as designers, we can't really design, that. So it's a question of the totality of things, and that's also why it is exciting with hospitality design because it's not just about design. And it's not just about the invisible hand or the back of house and all that I'm describing. It's really about how the service integrates in that and how the quality of the food, the smell, the acoustics. I'm sitting in a pretty living room here, right? But in any restaurant, acoustics should be something that even in this big space, it has to feel like you are in an intimate space, right? So all those things you have to consider, and I think it's equally important to do it. And then of course the sense of place also, to do Italian restaurant in Saudi Arabia um, is kind of out of place, because
Mm.
you are in Saudi. Why not embrace the local cuisine? And if you do an Italian restaurant, don't try to make it like you are in Rome, because you are not. So to me, also there is something kind of like even then the food is Italian and you are in Saudi. Don't try to pretend like you are in Italy, but only the taste of the food will remind you of that. So you have to get the design have to speak both to being Italian, but also being in the presence of where you are. So I think that's an interesting way of working around it, and that all those senses and sensory experiences come together like that. And that excites me a lot, to be honest.
And well, you mentioned Saudi Arabia. Obviously, they're doing some incredible projects at the moment. And
Oh yeah.
what I actually love about Saudi Arabia, in comparison to, for example, Dubai, that it's really true to its origins and its
Oh yeah.
heritage. And uh, I'd imagine the projects that you have worked at as well been
Absolutely.
it needed to have that. It needed to have that heritage, but also they are quite forward thinking. They are quite innovative. So how do you balance that heritage and culture tradition with
Yeah.
innovation?
Yeah, I think in Saudi has been for many years, as many countries that are developing a tourism sector, right? Searching to put a lot of big brands in the portfolio. So the more 5-star, 6, 7-star brands you have, the better it is. However, I think the interesting twist to that story is that right now the local market is developed and the tourism is starting to come, which is really exciting. And I think now the younger generation in Saudi, and reminding you and the audience also that 70% of the Saudi population is under 30, which is staggering numbers, right? Meaning that that population would like to investigate their own country. and would like to go to locations that are not typically in the Riyadh or in Jeddah, in a 5-star hotel, but they would like to go in the off the beaten street and go to locations where they haven't been before, experience the mountains, experience the desert, experience the sea, experience the culture of their own country in places they've never been before, because the country is incredibly based in different experiences. I mean, you can ski in Saudi. When people think about that in the world, they're like Saudi Arabia is desert. It's much, much more. And to explore the opportunities of the country, we need to build, the off the track locations and embrace that local cuisines, local people, and actually stand behind the authenticity and the hospitality of the people. And that excites me a lot, because, to do another 5-star hotel with a big brand, it's exciting, maybe more in a monetary compensation mindset as a designer. But what really excites me is to do something in a place where it has not been done before, and to do something in a place where you really embrace the local hospitality. And that makes me excited. And to do something that is also for the younger generation of people, because they have all seen the 5-star properties around the world, because they all traveled, they all tried, the different variety of things. And now I think it's the time to make something that is really true to Saudi hospitality. And that, I think, maybe Saudi needs people like us to come and not make it, but to help and to move it gently forward and make something that is actually Saudi, not international, not Western, but truly local. And that, I think, is super exciting. That really makes me believe in the future of that.
Exactly. I think it's actually a general trend. People want to come and experience the unique personality of that destination, right?
Yeah.
People don't want to go to the same locations. They want to see the uniqueness of the place. And Saudi has got so much to offer and so much to surprise. I can imagine. It's been such a closed country for so many years, and finally it's open to tourists from all over the world.
Exactly. It's super exciting, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, talking about the trends and what currently shapes the hospitality and design and hospitality industry, and I think across multiple industries, in fact, the personalization, people want to have that individual experience specifically tailored for them. How do you see this trend developing and impacting design, and what elements would develop in future? What your projections for future trends?
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, right? So I cannot predict the future, but I can definitely say from a personal perspective, what attracts me and my peers in both in design, but also from a more global perspective in working mostly with the luxury or upmarket hospitality sector, is that it has to be something that has roots in the place. So I think placemaking is very, very important. And it sounds kind of twisted that you say placemaking, right? But if you go to the Red Sea, for instance, and look at those developments, you can put a 5-star property at the Red Sea, and develop that and make it a destination so it feels authentic to it. But I think a lot of what makes a great destination is that somebody understood the placemaking and understood the surroundings and including that. Because, as we spoke on the very first, like with a restaurant, for instance, and you go to like a big international hotel chain, you turn on the TV and there's an infomercial goes like, if you're hungry past 10 o'clock, you can go to our lobster bar and grill at first floor. You don't want that. You want to go, if you're hungry past 10, you want to go to the authentic local cuisine that gives you new taste of the world. And that is a placemaking exercise that has to happen. And I think that is something that many of the big brands don't really do, because they have a set of rules and a set of things that work for them across the world. And I think they have to move past that. And they have to actually understand that if they want to become a destination of importance, they need to do the placemaking of the world. And you can only do that by actually understanding what's around you. And you need to make something that is authentic to that location. And I think those brands will succeed. And the other brands that just makes the same, movement rules based on their guidebook will probably not really make something that will excite people. So I think the future is where people are focusing on the placemaking. And I know also at your conference, there's going to be hopefully an important conversation about that with the Florian Wuberfeld, who is an expert in that field. Yeah. So that I'm excited about.
And well, talking about future, I think more and more travelers want to see ESG coming through. Make sure that this is all done in a way that it's good for environment, it's good for climate as well. And it must be really challenging to balance the use maybe of more eco-conscious elements in that sort of luxury space as well. And how do you balance that to ensure that
it is difficult, I would say, because in traditional building techniques, concrete is definitely the go-to material, right? And it is for good reasons. Is super stable. It's floating. You can just cast it on site, right? However, it's also one of the most polluting materials in the world, and to be able to kind of break that cycle of things, we need to look at new materials. And I think in the north, where I'm from Copenhagen, I mean, we are right now next week actually launching a new product in the far north, in northern Norway, North Cap, which is not a skyscraper. It's 50 meters tall. So, unless the clouds are very low, it might be touching them. But apart from that, it's in a fisherman's village in North Cap. And there is like 75 people living there, but there's 250,000 tourists a year in that village, which is absolutely incredible, right? But there's no hotel. So we won a competition some years ago to make this tall structure, which is made entirely out of solid timber. And solid timber is CLT is called, crushed laminated timber, is a super sustainable material. And that works in certain areas of the world. I mean, we are building also in the desert in California, in Joshua Tree, a retreat made out of solid timber also. But it does have some limitations, because if you are in an extreme hot environment, it dries out the timber also. So you need to protect it from the extreme heat. And in Saudi, you have extreme heat. But also, if you go to the coastlines, you might have more humidity from the sea, but it has a lot of salt in it. So materials that are stable in environment in Saudi, typically in the traditional places, desert, might not work so well. However, if you go into the mountainous regions, it might actually work. Then the problem is that you don't have any, companies that facilitate it locally. It's typically made out of pine. Pine wood, is typically from, forest seasons, which is Austria, it's Switzerland, it's Norway, it's Sweden, not so much Denmark. It could be Canada also. So when you have to manufacture all of that here and cut it out, computerized in CAD programs, you have to ship it to Saudi and build it there. It might not be so sustainable after all. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the problems that, even when you go for the ESG programs, many of them also become kind of obsolete, because the building materials that works well in most regions of the world might not work as well in Saudi. So then we have to go into rammed earth. We have to go into ways that we are building sustainable with what materials we have. And that is a different way of building. And that is something that is yet to be explored, I think, in Saudi also. But that is even more exciting. So I think there's many ways to do this. We just have to be very smart about it. And if you do use sustainable materials, then you have to think very much about how it works in the environment where you are building it. I know that was a long rant, but it's pretty exciting actually, because sustainability is not only building, it's also how you run a property. It's the food you serve.
Exactly.
Do you source it locally? Are you doing vegetarian food? Are you doing vegan food? And I know it's something that is also important to the hospitality world, that many of the traditional meals are sourced, based on meat and fish and so on. But if you go vegan, for instance, you have a lot of sustainable impact on that. That is also something that is new to the Saudi world, where most meals are, protein based and a lot of heavy protein. I hope also that you will have you have a dog in the background. That's nice. That you have uh, uh, um, a young lady from Jeddah who has made, I guess, one of the first 100% vegan restaurants in Saudi, which is really exciting because there you have a new era of hospitality that is based on making something that is not based on protein or vegetables, but based on taste. How does it taste? How is the texture in your mouth? And I think that twist is needed to move things. And the same with design and building techniques. You have to rethink the narrative of concrete, versus rimmed earth, versus solid timber buildings, and how you can twist it. So there's a new world, and the people who built in Saudi have to embrace that new world and look at it with new perspective. And I look forward to be a part of that change, as I think the country is totally ready to do it, especially with the young generation. They want to go and they want to do new things. And you can replace a skyscraper, the Jeddah, tower, which is 1 kilometer tall, with solid timber. Yet, it is a concrete or steel structure, but you can do something that is less tall and more sustainable with new materials. And that I think is exciting. Twist the narrative around food, that it doesn't have to be fish or beef or lamb. You can do something that's as tasty out of vegan options. That we have to embrace. And I think there's a lot of exciting news in that field. And I feel hopeful, not only for Saudi, but for the world, actually, that we can twist that and make that a new movement in hospitality.
A real opportunity for innovators, I'd imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. And Saudi is innovative. And if you think about the time from being a desert state into being a desert kingdom into being a first mover in hospitality, the time is really now. And now is the time to do it. And it's also to embrace the young and let all the fathers and uncles step back and let their future generation take over, because they have the power and they want to do it. But, culturally, it takes time. But I think the time is now.
Well, you must have worked on some incredible projects, and I'd imagine it's not always been smooth sailing. There must be some fun and unexpected challenges. Anything that you can share with us in terms of some incredible challenge that you managed to convert into more of a creative solution when it comes to design? I'd imagine that's again an opportunity to innovate.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things, and that is, when we work with clients in the region, is to understand that you're, especially like Danish or Northern European, we are typically very structured. Time is like of essence. Don't things go to certain ways. But what you cannot do in any of the countries in the regions is to expect that everything goes as you plan. And I think that's an exciting thing. And I've been in a couple of situations where we come down and we have big presentations, important people, and it's on Tuesday and everything is planned for Tuesday. Tuesday morning say, oh, well, it's going to be Wednesday. And you're like, what? They're not respecting our time. And then Wednesday comes and Thursday say, oh, no, it's going to be Friday. And then Friday, they say it's going to be Sunday. And in our world, that's incredibly rude. But in the region, it's quite normal because that's how things are going. So now we are working with the objective that if we are doing a presentation, we expect it to be a week. And of course, we also have to account for that flexibility to do things. And what I like then, once you then meet and you talk about the project, then it's in an extremely respectful way. And then you move very quickly forward. And I think that's an interesting objective to things where in Scandinavia and Germany also, to a certain degree in UK also, you expect things to be on time. But when you work in the region, you have to expect that things are not always happening the way that you structure them. And you have to embrace that. And I think that's also an interesting cultural perspective to hospitality. That, once things move, they move very quickly forward. But until they move, they don't move. And that, I think, is an experience that you have to take as a part of it and embrace. Otherwise, you're going to be frustrated. And then you shouldn't work in the region. So exactly. I think that's an important perspective. And I can imagine you guys also have that experience with even with doing a conference. It might not always be on the date that you planned first.
Indeed. And lots of stories from our side as well. And I think
exactly
you're totally right. You need to embrace the environment that you're working in, the cultures, understand them, and make it work and adapt to that. Adaptability is really important. And,
I would say one thing from having a studio in Beijing for many years and working in that region, doing hundreds of projects, is that I might not speak the language, but I speak the culture, and I think that's a very important thing. Culturally understanding, where people come from, and that your culture, my culture, is totally different. I can't come with my culture and lie that on other people's expectations. I have to embrace the culture and understand where they come from. Otherwise, I can never do something that will satisfy the local taste or myself for that sake. So I have to put all that aside and then come with an open mind and do something that will fit into that culture. Otherwise, I will be very disappointed on a daily basis. So all the guards are gone. You go in and you fully embrace the culture. Otherwise, forget about it.
Indeed. No, that's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
This is incredible, and really appreciate your input and insight in this exciting world of hospitality design. Thank you so much for spending time with us. Maybe so before we wrap up, like a final question, we're talking about culture and the importance of that. And we also talked about personalization and how important it to create experiences for specific type of people. How do you balance then something in hospitality from outside when we're talking about attracting travelers to the region, and how you would adapt the experience and adapt the design to different cultures? Because I'd imagine people from all over the world would be visiting. So any exciting insights you can share around that?
Yeah, I think, what I think is the most important, if you think about the time, backwards. My mother, for instance, she has traveled to almost every place in the world. She has traveled Saudi in the 60s and was almost sold one of her friends for like 100 camels, which at that time has been a high price for a blonde young woman, right? But her friend declined the offer and took it as a joke. And what I think is exciting about that, the whole mindset of that, is that the way that we travel back then and now is that culturally we need to integrate our expectations always. And that's why I think it is so important for any hospitality brand and any country that also opens up, as Saudi is doing now, to foreigners. It is to give them authenticity. And even then, I know it's easy to say, if you have a lot of luxury brand or big brand names, another big 5 or 7-star hotel is not gonna, make it in the future. It has to be something where people mix. And I think for me, the most exciting hospitality experiences is really something that is home brew. And I think what Saudi is yet to offer is something that is home brew, something that actually is made in Saudi and understands the culture and give that culture. It's not a question of giving Saudi coffee, and putting on a authentic dress, because that's more like a trip down memory lane. It's a question of offering the future Saudi hospitality also, and the future people of Saudi, because they're so young and they are so eager to show the world. And I think, very often I think if you go into a luxury setting, like a 5 or 7-star hotel, there's no room for people with less means. So I kind of find it exciting on a personal level that in any hospitality setting in Saudi, you should both be able to offer a grand suite to a super affluent Saudi family that come with the whole entourage. And next door, there has to be room for a young couple from the US that travels with less means. And there have to be an opportunity for them to integrate and create experiences together. Even then, they don't have a lot of money. And maybe the big family comes and pay for everything with no problems. But everybody integrate in a hospitality situation where maybe they cook together. Maybe they do authentic clay work together from the region. Maybe they do, tell stories to each other. So this kind of placemaking is super important. And you need to make that, and you need to make room for all people to come together and give equal opportunities. It might sound naive, but I do really feel that the company that have the concept to make that and work together and make that community feeling, you can make friends for the future from across the world. And I think that's what true hospitality is about, is that meeting. And if you always make the segmentation, say this is a hostel, this is a 5-star luxury property, people are never going to meet each other because they stay in the 5-star luxury property and, sit in that world, where that property can offer you everything. But if you have some people who would normally stay in a hostel, have the opportunity to get that experience also and maybe earn tokens by doing communal work, have a garden, make food together, share experiences. That's the future of hospitality. And that should be Saudi, because that really is where I meet people in Saudi, is by, speaking to people who are just generally interested in sharing experiences. If anyone can do that, it's Saudi, because it's a young country, young people. So let's work on that. And that would be just wow.
That's an incredible wrap up for the chat today. It's such an exciting time to do
much more to be shared in May. Looking forward to speaking in front of some extremely interesting people. It's going to be super fun.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, Johannes. I absolutely loved chatting with you today. And
true pleasure.
Looking forward to seeing you at our events.
Yeah, so am I. It's going to be amazing. In a 5-star hotel.
Exactly. Well, let's try to see how we can bring people together to share that.
We will bring people together for sure. It's a goal and a promise from my side. Looking much forward to more.